You're about to hear the story of one of the boldest tech bets ever, where billions were spent trying to build the next version of the internet, and the world basically shrugged. The plan was simple: ditch screens, step into a digital universe, and live work and hang out inside the Metaverse. And at one point, it wasn't just talk. Companies were pouring money into it like it was guaranteed to be the next iPhone moment. But then something happened. The hype didn't turn into habit. The headsets didn't become normal. The virtual worlds didn't fill up. And what was supposed to be the future started looking like an expensive ghost town. Here's the real question, though. Was it actually a bad idea? Or did it fail for a much deeper reason most people missed? Because once you see the real cause, you'll notice the exact same pattern showing up in new trends right now. If you want the full breakdown, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and comment Metaverse, so I know to drop the next chapter fast. Now, before we can explain why it failed, we have to answer one uncomfortable question. What was the Metaverse supposed to be in the first place? And why did everyone pretend they agreed on the definition? The Metaverse sounds like one thing, right? Like a single place you can log into. Some giant digital universe where everyone meets, works, and plays. But here's the first problem. The Metaverse was never one clear product. It was a word, a marketing umbrella, a vibe, and depending on who you asked, it meant something totally different. To gamers, it sounded like an upgraded MMO. Big shared worlds, avatars, digital economies. To tech executives, it sounded like the next platform shift, like going from desktop to mobile, but even bigger. To investors, it sounded like a gold rush, virtual land, virtual stores, virtual everything. And to normal people, it often sounded like homework, like someone trying to convince you to do life in a headset. That messy definition matters because when a concept means everything, it also means nothing. If you can't explain it in one sentence, you can't sell it to millions of people. And the craziest part, the Metaverse wasn't even a new idea. We've seen pieces of it for decades. The word itself got popular from a sci-fi novel where people escaped into a digital world. Then later, early versions showed up in games and online spaces, places where people already had avatars, identities, and communities. Think of things like massive online games, virtual chat worlds, even simple digital hangouts. Those were Metaverse-like, long before the corporate world started using the word. So why did the Metaverse suddenly explode into the mainstream? Why did it go from a nerdy concept to something every CEO wanted to pitch on stage? Because at a certain moment, a bunch of forces lined up at once. Pandemic-era isolation, booming tech stocks, cheap money, and a growing fear inside big tech companies that the phone era was maturing. And if the phone era is maturing, the next question becomes dangerous. Who owns the next platform? Who controls the next app store? Who gets to be the gatekeeper? That's when the Metaverse stopped being a fun, futuristic idea and became a business survival plan. And once it becomes that, it changes everything: how it's built, how it's marketed, and who it's really for. But here's the part almost nobody admitted out loud. The Metaverse was being sold as a single destination, but it was actually 4 different dreams competing with each other: VR gaming, virtual work, digital identity, and a new economy. Those dreams don't naturally fit together. And when you try to force them into one product, you end up with something that feels confusing, awkward, and unfinished. Which brings us to the biggest definition gap of all. Was the Metaverse supposed to be a headset thing or an internet thing? Because if it's an internet thing, you don't need VR at all. But if it's a headset thing, then the entire future depends on whether people will actually wear these devices every day. And the company that bet the most on that answer? It wasn't some startup. It was one of the biggest tech giants on Earth. And they didn't just bet money. They bet their entire identity. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about why Meta went all in, what problem they were secretly trying to escape, and the moment the Metaverse dream stopped being a vision and became a desperate move. Meta didn't go all in on the Metaverse because it was bored. It went all in because it was cornered. For years, Facebook, then Instagram, was basically a money machine powered by one thing: attention. The more time people spent scrolling, the more ads Meta could sell. Simple. But then the ground started shifting under them, and it wasn't just one threat, it was multiple threats stacking at the same time. First, growth got harder. Most of the people who were going to join Facebook already had. Younger users were spending more time elsewhere. The internet didn't stop existing, but the easy expansion era was ending. Second, the competition got brutal. Platforms like TikTok proved that attention can be stolen fast when a new format hits. And when attention moves, ad money follows. Third, and this is the part many people underestimate, Meta doesn't control the platform it depends on. Most Facebook and Instagram users live on phones, and phones are controlled by Apple and Google. That means Meta is basically renting space inside somebody else's house. And when the landlord changes the rules, you pay the price. When Apple made privacy changes that limited tracking, Meta's ad targeting took a hit. That wasn't just an annoyance, it was a warning sign. It showed Meta how vulnerable it was to decisions made by other companies. So imagine you're in Meta's position. Your biggest business depends on mobile platforms you don't own. Your user growth is slowing. Your competition is grabbing younger audiences. And your entire empire is built on ads that get weaker if you can't track as well. What do? If you're a normal company, you optimize and cut costs. But if you're a giant tech company, you try to create the next platform so you never have to ask permission again. That's the real logic behind the Metaverse push. Control the next world the way Apple controls iOS. If Meta could build the hardware people use, the operating system they run, the app store they buy from, and the social graph inside it, that's not just a product, that's an escape plan, that's a new kingdom. And it explains why the Metaverse wasn't marketed like a side project. It was marketed like destiny. Rebrand the whole company, change the name, put future in every presentation. Because if you're going to bet billions, you need the world to believe it's inevitable. But here's the twist. Meta didn't just try to build a new platform, it tried to build a new platform while defending its old one at the same time. That's like trying to rebuild a plane mid-flight while other planes are trying to steal your passengers. So they poured money into it, research, headsets, teams, content deals, virtual worlds, because they believed the only way to win was to outspend everyone and arrive first. Except arriving first doesn't matter if people don't want to arrive at all. And that's where the story turns from bold vision into massive burn, because the spending wasn't random. It was targeted, deliberate, and honestly shocking once you see what it was paying for. In the next chapter, we're breaking down what the $10 billion burn actually means, where that money went, and the first sign that this entire bet was already slipping long before the public realized it. When people hear $10 billion burn, they picture one big check getting lit on fire. But the truth is worse. It wasn't one mistake. It was a whole system that kept eating money every single day. Meta's Metaverse spending mostly lived inside a division called Reality Labs. And the numbers are the kind that make you blink twice. In 2024 alone, Meta said Reality Labs reduced their overall operating profit by about $17.7 billion, while bringing in only about $2.15 billion in revenue. That's not we invested heavily. That's we're funding an entire alternate universe with ad money from the real one. So where does all that cash actually go? First, hardware. Headsets don't magically become cheap. You have to design custom chips, improve lenses, build tracking, refine controllers, shrink the weight, boost performance, and do it again and again. And even then, there's the quiet secret of consumer tech. Sometimes you sell the device close to cost, or even at a loss, because you're hoping to make the real money later from software, apps, and the platform. Second, the platform itself. Virtual worlds aren't just a game. You need servers, safety systems, moderation tools, identity, avatars, payments, developer tools, creator programs, and constant updates to keep the world from feeling dead. Third, content. If you want people to show up, you have to give them reasons, events, experiences, games, partnerships, and that means paying studios, funding creators, buying companies, and making deals to fill the shelves before customers walk into the store. That's why Meta spent years buying VR studios and experiences, because they understood the brutal truth. Without great content, the headset becomes an expensive paperweight. Fourth, people. Reality Labs was stacked with engineers, researchers, designers, some of the most expensive talent in tech, working on problems that are genuinely hard. Motion sickness, hand tracking, mixed reality, real-time social spaces, and making everything feel natural. And here's what makes the burn terrifying. A lot of this spending is the kind you can't pause without losing momentum. R&D doesn't politely wait for hype to return. So the money kept flowing quarter after quarter, while the public was slowly starting to realize something uncomfortable. The metaverse wasn't getting adopted at the speed the spending demanded, and that's the trap. Because once you build a machine that costs billions to run, you don't just ask, is this good? You ask, how do we make people use it fast enough to justify this? Which leads to the real turning point of the whole story. The moment Meta discovered that the biggest problem wasn't the tech or the graphics or even the money. It was human behavior, and the adoption wall was about to hit harder than anyone expected. At this point, Meta had the money, the engineers, the marketing, and a product people could actually buy. So why didn't the metaverse take off? Because they ran into the adoption wall, the part no amount of hype can bulldoze. VR asked regular people to do something unnatural. Charge a separate device, put weight on your face, block out the real world, and commit your full attention just to enter an experience. That's a big request for something that often felt like a worse version of what phones and laptops already do. And even when the tech improved, the social friction stayed. Wearing a headset isn't like wearing earbuds. You look unavailable. You can't make quick eye contact. You can't casually pop in the way you can on your phone. The metaverse wasn't failing because it was impossible. It was failing because it wasn't effortless. And when a product requires effort, you need one powerful reason to justify it, one killer reason people can't ignore. But instead, many users stepped into these worlds and felt the same thing. Okay, now what? And that now what problem leads directly to the next chapter, because even if the hardware was perfect, the metaverse had another issue that made it feel like an empty city with the lights on. So let's talk about the empty city problem, because this is where the metaverse starts to feel less like a future and more like a mall built in the middle of nowhere. The internet doesn't win because it's impressive. It wins because it's populated. The best social platforms are basically network effects in a trench coat. People show up because other people are already there. But the metaverse couldn't get that flywheel spinning. Not at scale. Here's the loop every successful platform needs. Creators make stuff people want. People show up to consume it. The audience motivates more creators, and the growing audience attracts even more creators. That loop is what made YouTube explode. It's what made TikTok unstoppable. It's what makes games like Fortnite feel alive. The metaverse tried to jump straight to the world part before it earned the crowd part. And without the crowd, the world feels haunted. Even if the graphics were perfect, it's still weird walking into a virtual space and realizing you're basically alone. A lot of users tried it once, didn't instantly find something irresistible, and never formed the habit. But creators couldn't fix it either, because building for VR is harder than building for a normal screen. On YouTube, a creator can film with a phone. On TikTok, you can post in minutes. In the metaverse, you're often dealing with 3D assets, motion, interactivity, and a totally different design language. That's a bigger barrier, which means fewer creators, which means fewer must-see experiences. And then there's the second layer, the "why would I build here" problem. Creators don't just want an audience. They want stability and rewards. They want to know they can grow, monetize, and not get erased by a platform that changes direction. But the metaverse ecosystem felt like it was constantly being rewritten. New worlds, new tools, new bets, new rebrands. It didn't feel like a settled place creators could confidently build their careers inside. Then you have the social gravity issue. Most people already have their friends on existing apps. Your group chats, your communities, your favorite creators, your memes, those live on platforms you can access instantly. The metaverse was asking people to move their entire social life into a new neighborhood that didn't have schools, restaurants, or streetlights yet. And even if a few people moved in, they'd still be missing the reason most people go online in the first place. The sense that something is happening right now. The metaverse often felt like a space waiting for a moment that never arrived. Now add the problem nobody likes to talk about: moderation and safety. The moment you create a shared world, you inherit all the messy parts of human behavior, and moderating a text comment is already hard. Moderating a voice conversation, a live interaction, an avatar following you around is harder. If a platform can't make people feel comfortable and safe, mainstream adoption slows down fast. That's not a minor detail. That's the difference between a niche community and everyone's next hangout. So the metaverse got squeezed from both sides. Too empty to feel worth it, and too complicated to scale fast. And the more it struggled to feel alive, the more money it needed just to keep the lights on. But here's where it gets really interesting. Even with all these problems, the metaverse might have survived if the outside world stayed the same. Instead, the outside world changed, suddenly and brutally. And that shift is what turned a slow adoption problem into a full-on collapse. In the next chapter, we're getting into the moment the hype machine ran into real life, the economy, the post-pandemic snapback, and why the internet's attention moved on like the metaverse never existed. And then the world snapped back. That's the part most retrospectives skip, because it sounds like an excuse. But it's actually one of the biggest reasons the metaverse storyline collapsed so fast. The metaverse boom was born in a very specific moment: pandemic isolation, record screen time, and an economy where money was cheap and big bets felt normal. People were stuck inside, digital life was everything, and tech companies were printing cash. In that environment, the next internet didn't sound crazy. It sounded inevitable. But when the world reopened, reality got its pullback. People wanted physical experiences again. Offices reopened, schools reopened, travel returned. And the average person didn't feel like adding virtual life on top of real life. They were already exhausted. Then came the economic shift, inflation worries, higher interest rates, and a market that stopped rewarding expensive moonshots. When money is cheap, investors love long-term visions. When money tightens, they ask one brutal question: when does this make profit? That's where the metaverse started bleeding credibility, because the adoption wasn't exploding, but the spending was still enormous. Every quarter that Reality Labs posted huge losses, the story got harder to defend. And here's the sneaky part. Once the public narrative turns, it becomes self-fulfilling. People don't want to join a ghost town. Developers don't want to build for a dying platform. Partners don't want to attach their brand to something the internet is clowning. So the perception problem accelerates the actual problem. At the same time, the culture moved on. The internet's attention is ruthless. It doesn't slowly drift away. It teleports. 1 month, everyone is talking about virtual land and VR concerts. The next month, the conversation is about layoffs, the cost of living, and the next big thing. And that next big thing was a nuclear-level attention magnet, generative AI. AI didn't ask people to wear a headset. It didn't require clearing space in your room. It didn't need a new platform. It showed up inside the apps people already used and did something instantly useful. Write, design, summarize, create. It felt like the future arrived in a browser tab. So the metaverse had a timing disaster. It needed years of patience at the exact moment the world lost patience. It needed hype to turn into habit right when people wanted less digital overwhelm, not more. And it needed cultural obsession right when a new obsession replaced it. The result wasn't just less interest. It was a narrative crash. Suddenly, metaverse became a joke word. And once that happens, it's incredibly hard to rebuild momentum, because now you're not just selling a product, you're fighting embarrassment. But here's the twist. Meta didn't completely lose, because while the loud metaverse dream was getting roasted, something quieter was happening under the surface, something that might explain why they kept building anyway. In the next chapter, we're finishing the story with the afterlife. What parts of this bet actually survive? What meta may have been building all along, and the one version of the metaverse that could still win without ever calling itself a metaverse. So is the metaverse dead? Not exactly. The live your whole life in VR version mostly collapsed, but the tech didn't disappear. It just quietly moved into the places where it actually makes sense. That's the afterlife of the metaverse. It stopped trying to be a new reality and started acting like a tool, because VR and mixed reality are genuinely powerful. When they do something, screens can't. Training is a perfect example. If you're teaching a surgeon, a pilot, or a factory worker, practice in a simulated environment can be safer, cheaper, and repeatable. Designers can build and test in 3D without needing a real prototype. Therapists can use controlled immersive environments for treatment. And of course, gaming remains the clearest win, because games don't need you to replace your life. They just need you to have a great experience for an hour. That's where the technology fits naturally. No grand speeches required, just usefulness. And that leads to the real lesson of the $10 billion burn. You can't buy a new habit. You can't force people into a platform shift by announcing it. People adopt new technology when it solves a problem they already have in a way that feels easier or better than what they're doing right now. The metaverse tried to skip that step. It tried to jump straight to the next internet without earning the everyday reason for normal people to show up. But that doesn't mean the whole bet was pointless. In fact, one argument is that Meta wasn't just building a virtual world. They were building capabilities, hand tracking, spatial computing, avatars, hardware, and the foundations for AR glasses and mixed reality. If that future arrives through lightweight glasses instead of bulky headsets, this story gets rewritten. The metaverse might return under a different name, in a form people actually tolerate daily. And that's the final twist. The metaverse didn't fail because immersive tech is useless. It failed because the first version was too heavy, too early, and overpromised what it could deliver. The future didn't cancel, it rescheduled. If you want the next video, comment Part 2 and tell me which angle you want. The biggest myths people still believe about the metaverse, the real numbers behind Reality Labs, or the companies quietly winning with VR and mixed reality right now. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who still thinks the metaverse was just a meme. Because the real story is way more interesting than that.